Joining us now, Congressman, 9th District, Virginia, Trump country, very red. He's going to win re-election handily, although, you count your chickens before they hatch. Morgan Griffith. Congressman, great to have you.
Good to be with you.
Okay, I want to talk about the fallout from Kavanaugh. What has the reaction been of your constituents? I know you're out there in the middle of campaign, 28 days remaining, 27 days now, knocking on doors, talking to voters on the phone. What are they saying, Congressman?
Well, the vast majority of them were just appalled by the whole process surrounding Kavanaugh and the last-minute allegations with no corroboration. Everybody feels for Ms. Ford, but they're like, seriously, 36 years later, it's very difficult to judge when you have no corroboration. Nobody remembers it. The people she said were there weren't there. And that's basically what I've been hearing on the streets. Even had a longtime Democrat pull me over yesterday and just say, what was that all about? Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting. But most of the folks out here, recognize something must have happened to the lady, but that, that there was no way to tie that to the justice.
So we go forward from here. CNN coming out with a generic poll saying that the Democrats are now ahead by 13. If you take this on face value and think it's accurate, that's a danger zone for Republicans. Also, they were saying that women are breaking for Democrats at 63%. And I just got to get your reaction to this because I got this poll yesterday, and so I called my friend John McLaughlin, who's been, I know, for 30 years, all the way back when I was in college in New Jersey. So we're the same age, very long time ago. I went to Fairleigh Dickinson. He went to Drew, right up the street. We played baseball together a long time ago. And I'm like, you have a poll that says Republicans are down in the generic ballot nationwide by 4, and women are tied. They have a poll saying that women are voting for Democrats 2-1, and they're up by 13. I said, how could there be such a vast difference? And he said, my poll's real. Theirs is a push poll to get a result. From your own internal polls, Morgan, where do you think we are right now in the House? And do you guys have a shot? Is there a pathway to victory in 27 days for the Republicans?
There is a pathway to victory, and a lot of it will depend on folks who aren't, who don't want to get in fights with their neighbors and just aren't saying anything. Because, unfortunately, those who are rabid about the president and therefore all Republicans are, they're just, it's hard for folks to talk to them, so they're just not talking. But I do think that the whole Kavanaugh incident stirred up the base. I do think that the Kavanaugh incident moved women who were on the fence our way. Those who were already rabid stayed that way. But those who were trying to sort it out, I think they moved our way. And so I think probably it's somewhere in between the two polls because I do think that there's a greater number of people who will turn out who lean to the Democrat side. So I don't think that we can be completely encouraged by the McLaughlin poll. His methodology is sound. I just think there will be more voters turn out than people realize. And in some areas like mine, that'll be helpful. In others, it won't.
So I still think the Republicans can hang on by 2 or 3, but certainly the math is against them. History is against them. Pennsylvania redistricting is against them. Retirements are against them. Money is against them. So they're like 0 for 5 on that front. But the one thing they have is the economy. I mean, this economy, Congressman Griffith, is unbelievable, and it's for everybody. And mainly it's affecting blue-collar workers, lower-income wage earners. We have the lowest unemployment, 3.7% we've had since 1969. And this, even though the lowest unemployment in 50 years, it's on top of the fact 15 million additional people have entered the job market who dropped out after 2008 because they couldn't find a job. Isn't that the untold story?
That is the untold story, and I do think that will make a difference. I was, citing that last night at a forum. I said, look, I was 11 the last time that we had unemployment this low. And as you know, I'm no spring chicken. They're not looking up there going, well, that's just a few years ago. They're going up there, oh, my God, that was forever ago. And now I'm not ancient yet either. Let's not go there because you and I are the same age. But at the same time, I was 11 the last time we had unemployment at this level. We were still riding the last vestiges of the economic bump after World War II. It's all completely different, and yet we have an unemployment rate that's unbelievable. And I do think that'll make a difference. It will encourage those who generally support Republicans, and more importantly, though, a lot of those people who were out of the workforce and demoralized who've come back in, I think they're going to go to the polls and vote Republican. And if they are Democrat in their mindset, a lot of those folks are just not going to say anything and either not go to the polls or go to the polls and vote Republican, even though they may come from a history of Democrat voting.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think it is going to be a little bit different. I also think you're right I think we're going to see some of what we saw in Virginia in 2017, record turnout. You know, you look at that 2017 election, although it was a debacle for Gillespie and the Republicans, Ed Gillespie got a bigger Republican vote count than any Republican in Virginia's history running statewide, and it wasn't even close. It's just that the Democrats turned out more. I think you're going to see the same thing in these midterms, record turnout, and it's a matter of, you know, can the Republicans motivate their Trump base and get them out? Because these are not people that typically vote in every elections. I think we did a survey, and 15% of the Trump voters in 2016 hadn't voted in at least one decade. That's 5 cycles. And they just came out, and nobody saw it. So hopefully that's going to happen again. Congressman, I want to shift to Saudi Arabia, if I may, and then we'll go back to domestic politics. But I'm very concerned about this missing Saudi journalist who was a temporary resident of Virginia. He was in self-imposed exile. Jamal Khashoggi, employee of the Washington Post, a U.S.-based company, goes to the Saudi embassy in Istanbul, as you know, in order to get paperwork to get married, routine paperwork. He had been a critic of the Saudi government. That's why he wouldn't go back to Saudi Arabia, but he had to get these papers to get married to his Turkish fiancée. So he goes to the consulate. They see him go in. He doesn't come out. Meantime, a bunch of Saudi intel people flew in there. The Istanbul authorities have a record of that. They got all these black vans pulling up. They have a record of that. The guy is not emerged out, and nobody seems to be doing anything about it. Erdogan has an investigation, but there's no pressure being put on Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Do you find this troubling, sir?
I do. I find it very troubling. You know, it's disturbing because you've got a government that appears to have done something. Now, he may be a citizen of their country, but he was working in the United States, living in the United States. I think that our State Department needs to step in and put some pressure on them to get us answers. And it does not look good, and many people are worried that he has been killed. But even if he's just being held in captivity and interrogated, that's still a great concern, and we need to know that. If he's still alive and they have criminal charges, we need to figure out exactly what's going on and what action we ought to take. But somebody in our government ought to know what's happening, and at least publicly they have not revealed that.
Well, the United Kingdom's Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt told Saudi's ambassador on Tuesday that the UK expects urgent answers. They haven't gotten any. Here's the problem the Saudis have here. They've already said that he left and that their cameras weren't working. Because the first thing the Turkish authorities said is, okay, well, we have camera footage of him going in. We have no camera footage of him coming out. So if he did leave, give us your internal camera footage showing him leave. And then, we'll go from there. And they're like, the cameras didn't work that day. Then we find, they've already said, Mohammed bin Salman, who the Trump administration, as you know, was given a lot of leeway to, has already said, well, he's not here, he did leave, and you can come and inspect our embassy or consulate. But that doesn't mean anything if he's not there. So I don't know how they turn around now and say, oh, we arrested him, when they've already said that he left. I mean, this thing, when you say put pressure, diplomatic pressure, economic pressure, what type of pressure do you mean, Congressman?
Well, I think you start with diplomatic pressure. I don't think you jump immediately to economic pressure, but I think you start with diplomatic pressure, and then if you get no answers, then you start working. I would actually work on some of the economy, but more importantly, the munitions, the weapons that we help them with and that they need our help with. They're worried about Iran just as we are. They can't afford not to have an air force that can fly because they can't get any spare parts. Mm-hmm. So that's where I would probably go, is to the munitions side of the thing.
All right. Hopefully we can get an answer from this. I know that Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky says, he said last night that he's going to press the government by making the Senate vote on pending U.S. arms sales, all pending U.S. arms sales, as you just mentioned, to Saudi Arabia as a way to put more leverage on Mohammed bin Salman in order to figure out what happened. And basically what Paul is saying is, I want to have a vote in the Senate that basically suspends all sales, just like you mentioned, until we get answers. So we'll see how that plays out.
And I think that would work. I think that would work. They need to have a strong military because they're worried about the Iranians getting control or hegemony, more influence in the Middle East than they have. And they, as a rule, have always disliked each other. Persians versus Arabs goes way back.
Way back in history. Let's get back to domestic policy, Congressman Horgan Griffith, on health care. Senate Democrats today want to force a vote on a measure that would overturn the Trump administration's expansion of non-Obamacare plans. I would assume the attempt is to put the Republicans on record against protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Democrats are saying that even a failed vote could become a potential political weapon against Republican candidates in the fall, in the final 27 days here. And all polling shows that a majority of Americans, the one thing about Obamacare they really like is the fact that you can't be rejected for pre-existing conditions, nor can your prices get jacked up. How do the Republicans respond to this?
Well, and I haven't seen the Senate bill, but I will tell you that the bill that we had in the House that we passed, so this is what House members can say, had a protection for pre-existing conditions built right into it, the one that we sent over to the Senate. The language is very clear. Democrats have been, trying to mislead people by saying that, if you stood on one foot and leaned to the left in a heavy wind, that it might not cover you. I mean, it's just not accurate. The pre-existing conditions were there. I was in Johnson City when the president gave his speech last week, and he said, we're going to protect pre-existing conditions. And I think that's what you respond with is, a lot of it is smoke and mirrors that the Democrats are just playing politics with, just like they did with the Kavanaugh situation, because that's fresh in the voters' minds. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to do anything to pre-existing conditions. That's the one failure of the Republicans prior to Obama and the Democrats taking control, is that they never dealt adequately with that. And we are not going to make that mistake again. We're going to make sure, I wasn't there then, but we're going to make sure that people with pre-existing conditions are taken care of. And the House bill created these invisible risk pools, so the government picked up that cost. The difference between the people with pre-existing conditions and the regular cost, you would never know it if you were out in, a doctor getting the insurance card. But the government picks up that cost, and that lowers everybody's cost because now the insurance companies aren't having to put it into somebody's family who doesn't have a pre-existing condition, doesn't have to put those rates in, and they're spread it around to everybody. So the people with the condition are taken care of, and it's better for the people who don't have a pre-existing condition because they're not paying that additional risk into the pool.
Are the Democrats lying about this issue?
Well, they're certainly prevaricating and trying to, make it appear that it's something that it isn't. They're playing a lot of clever word games, and but they're 99% wrong. There is, under one scenario, like I said, if you stand on your left leg and then there's a heavy wind blowing, that somehow a state, if they could get a waiver, could figure out a way to get around that. But, I just don't see it. The bill is very clear, and I think they'd lose in court. But that would be the Democrats attacking the very issue that they think, or that they're claiming that they're the champions of. And is there a legal case that maybe somebody could challenge it under certain circumstances, yeah, maybe, but I think they'd lose. So it's pretty close to a lie, but not 100%. They do have one little thread that they can hang on for some legal case somewhere in the future that nobody believes will actually ever happen.
UN Ambassador Nikki Haley resigning yesterday kind of shocked the world. It didn't leak. She said she told the president 6 months ago she was going to be out after 2 years. Any idea what happened there?
No. Sometimes it is just what it is. You do a job, you've got, you enjoy it. As she said, it's an honor, but you realize it's not something you want to do or do forever, or that you're pigeonholed in. And you say, okay, I'm going to give it 2 years, and I'm going to step aside. You tell the president that. He says, well, I hope you'll change your mind. She doesn't. And it looks like it was all very friendly, and, there weren't any tweets back and forth about this, that, or the other. And, sometimes people just move on.
Replacement ideas?
No, I heard some names this morning, but, we have a lot of talented people in the United States, and I'm sure the president will find somebody who can do the job as well as former Governor Haley.
All right. Congressman Morgan Griffith, I've got 30 seconds. Tell me about the state of your campaign in District 9 of Virginia.
Well, it's interesting. Folks are revved up on the Democrat side, and they're raising lots of money. So we're raising lots of money to at least stay close. I think they're actually going to outspend me. That can happen, but our numbers are good, and people in Southwest Virginia aren't ready to accept somebody who's one of 27 congressional candidates out of 435 races endorsed by the Bernie Sanders socialist-leaning Our Revolution group. My opponent's right in line with him. He's up there with Alexandria. I never can remember how to say her last name, but the lady who beat Crowley in New York. They're right there together on philosophy, and I just don't think Southwest Virginia is going to suddenly shift to be more liberal than Arlington.
Congressman Morgan Griffith, great line. They're not going to shift to be more liberal than Arlington. Can't get much more liberal than that. On that note, we're going to take off. Thank you, Congressman. Great to have you with us. Always good to get your perspective. We'll have you back next week.